Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alissa Galobe, and I'm here finally after a little bit of a hiatus with my partner in crime, Scott Hayward. How's it going, Scott?
It's going very well, Alissa. How are you?
I'm doing very well because before I checked the score of the Panthers-Boston game, the Panthers were winning 1-0. So
Yep.
I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, Carolina was up 2-0, and then the Islanders went bang bang. So they're battling it out in the third period as we speak right now. This podcast is just going to be about the NHL playoffs.
Well,
how are you feeling after that game last night?
It was one of the craziest games I've seen in a while. Almost as crazy as I think 2 playoffs ago when we scored like 5 goals in the last 2 minutes or 4 goals in the last 2 minutes of the third period. That was nothing will ever top that, but it was pretty wild. And I was doing a lot of research after the game because Twitter blew up about this Wes McCauley, and I'm like, who's Wes McCauley?
The ref.
And how he goes back to Sheldon Keefe's junior's coach, and he was accused of whatever. It's just like a whole thing. So now Bunting's out for 3 games, and yeah, it was a wild game and just a wild score. It was just nuts. So we'll see what happens in game 2.
Yeah, I watched it on Steve Dangle's YouTube page. Because I feel like while I live here in Ontario, I should journey with Steve Dangle through his quest to see the Leafs go to his second round in the playoffs, which still might happen, right? Even John Cooper, head coach for the Lightning, said, like, listen, like, I'm always going to bet on my guys. I'm never going to bet against them, but Toronto still can win this series. It's only 1 game, so.
Well, I mean, last year in game 1, we beat them 5-0. So we beat them more than they beat us, and look what happened. So, yeah, it's always a wild ride. It's so funny to see all the videos, the TikTok videos, the YouTube and Facebook of people just so mad. Like, Leafs fans have no patience. Like, they get mad so fast. And, like, righteously, you know, it makes sense given everything that's happened the last, like, 6-7 years. But it's funny to see them just go off.
More than that, like the last almost 20 odd years, right? When was the last time they went to second round?
Yeah, but I mean, just like consecutively.
Yeah, it's been a long straight. A long run straight. It's interesting. Not that we're going to talk about this a ton right now, but it's interesting because so far in the NHL playoffs, and there's only 2 nights done as of this recording. The home teams, the ones that have home ice advantage to begin the playoffs with, are 2-6. So it's the away teams. It's the second seeded teams that seeded teams that have been having the advantage. So the LA Kings, the Jets. I was actually quite surprised that Grubauer and the Seattle Kraken, I watched the end of that game late last night, beat Colorado. Colorado only got 1 goal there. And I think that Jersey Rangers series is going to be that one's going to be interesting, even though it was only 5-1, the score was 5-1 last night. But I think this series really to watch is going to be Dallas and Minnesota. I don't know if you saw any highlights from that game. It went to overtime, and it was a slugfest. Like, whoever makes it out, like, I think we'll get to predictions later. I think that one's going to go to 7 games. Whoever makes it out of that series is going to be so tired and so beat up. Like, yeah, that's it's just brutal hockey to watch out there.
Yeah, the games, the series that I kind of care about the most, just personally, is the Edmonton LA series, because my husband hates this, but I like Edmonton. I really, really, really strongly believe that when you're the best player in the NHL, like, you have to win a cup, or at least, you know, I think win a cup, but at the very, very least make it to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, I just think it's wrong that McDavid has never done that so far. And then Boston, I just want them.
You mean
I
to
want
the
to beat them
finals?
so bad. Like, yeah, to the finals, to the Stanley Cup finals. I I also hate Boston, obviously, and I just want them to lose because of how good they are. Like, it would just be so much more victorious. Um, and then, of course, I like all the Canadian teams, so I'm very interested in Winnipeg, and yeah, we'll see what happens. Obviously, the Leafs will be there every every other night so far, but yeah, it'll be interesting. It's always a good time. But I don't know if I never can make it to like the final unless it's somebody I really care about because it just drags on too long. Spoken like a true hockey fan. I'm like, ugh. So we'll see.
I mean,
We'll see
it
what
definitely
happens.
can,
Anyway,
right? I mean, they're
yeah.
7-game series, right? So
Yeah, it's just, yeah. Remember when it was like delayed too, that one season? It was like the middle of summer. No one cared. No one cared.
yeah,
It was just.
you were super, super pregnant because I was visiting you and Aaron in the middle of August, and we were watching the play-in. Never mind the playoffs, right? We were watching the play-ins.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, how's your month been? We apologize to our listeners for taking a little bit of a hiatus. I had some family illnesses and we just had a lot going on, so we had to skip a few weeks there. But we're back. We're ready to go. Well, I can say that. I mean, Scott, you're you're preparing for a baby, so we'll see. Scott's currently pregnant, and
Do
he's
I?
going to
Yeah, I was
chest
gonna
feed.
say, do I look
Yeah.
like I'm about to have one?
He'll
Maybe
be
after
chest
Easter.
feeding and menstruating in no time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I'm preparing
but
my
you're
body
what specific date is your wife due?
on her birthday, May 5th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
I like to say that I planned it that way, but I mean, let's be real.
Oh, I hope not, like, no one ever shares a birthday in my family. I feel like it's a ripoff, especially for the kids, but see what happens.
Yeah, how was your guys' Easter?
Easter was good. No one was sick, which was great.
That's a
Yeah,
change.
it was just my mother-in-law came down with her husband, and it's funny though because we've been so sick, and then because right after we healed up, it was Easter. Every time we get into the car, my 2.5-year-old always asks, "Church?" And I go, "No, we're not going to church." And she goes, "Hospital?" I'm like, "No, we're not going to the hospital either." Those are the only two places she knows right now. But yeah.
That's adorable. Yeah, we had my best friend, his wife, and their kids all come up from Manitoba to visit us. So, besides my sister, they're kind of the first and probably amongst the last of my Manitoba connections to come out and visit. So, we basically did the same thing we did with my sister, which was great. She was the guinea pig, and we went to Niagara Falls, and we went to Niagara on the Lake, and took them to downtown Toronto. They, for the longest time, said, we're not going to go up in the tower. Then they finally did, which is like the one Toronto thing you have to do. We were actually there in downtown Toronto the evening of the Jays home opener. So it was super cool to see everyone just going into the stadium. Yeah. Had we not had 3 kids under the age of 5 amongst the 2 families, then it was just, we'd have scalp tickets or something like that. So it was great. It was
they renovated that stadium, and apparently if they had done it last year, they would have had like 19 more home runs or something.
No.
They like brought it in. Yeah, I went to a party this past weekend, and I learned a lot about baseball. I had no idea it was the only professional sport where the like stadiums don't have to be the exact same size, which is so crazy.
Isn't Fenway Park supposed to be one of the smaller ones to hit homers in?
You're asking the wrong person, but I learned a little bit about the Jays and their new-ish stadium, so maybe they'll get 20 more home runs this year. Who knows? If I was if I owned the baseball team, I would just take it in a bit and just get those homers. Anyway, I don't know how it works, but
then again, your opponents could do the same too, though, right?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so that's good, and they had a good visit. And how else is everything? How's your fam?
Great. Yeah, like I said, like you said, we're getting ready for the baby. That's gonna come, anywhere between the next couple of weeks, maybe next 3 weeks. We'll see what happens. And my daughter, she is walking around everywhere, running around everywhere, starting to say more words. I can't remember if I said this on the podcast already or not, but her first word was cheese, because that's her first love.
Chesterton would have liked that.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's a lot of fun. She knows my name, and so now that I've been back to work after Easter a little bit here, she'll want to come into the office. So we have no lock on the office door, so I have to barricade myself in. Otherwise, she'll just burst in. She's sleeping right now, so she won't come in. And but she can hear me from downstairs. So most of the time, because I'm trying to type in notes as I'm on phone calls for work, I'll have my phone on speaker so she can
Right.
hear when my phone call is done. And then Oriana says that she turns around and all of a sudden our daughter's gone. She's walked down the hall, up the stairs, and she just barges into my office and comes and sits on my lap. So it's quite distracting during the workday. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie, but
Oh,
at the
for
same
sure.
time, I love it, and I kind of don't want to barricade myself in. But I also need to get work done. So, well,
My husband's office is in the basement, and there have been a few times where I've been preoccupied, and Abby has run down while he's on a call pantsless. It's happened, so just be thankful that hasn't happened to you.
as long
Also,
as it
it's
wasn't
so
you
funny.
running downstairs that was pantsless.
It's also funny too because she knows our first names, so now she's starting to say like she'll be like Aaron, Aaron, and she'll walk around the house calling for Aaron's name. Oh man, he's like Daddy, it's Daddy, but oh man, toddlers, especially like 2, 3-year-olds, they are a riot. A handful, but a
Does
riot.
she
Anyway,
does she call did she
no, go
call
ahead.
you did she call you Alyssa at all?
Yeah, sometimes she goes, Lissa. Or if she's on the phone, she goes, hello, Lissa. Like a pretend phone. I'm like, what did you just say? Because you're wondering if you heard that correctly. And yeah, that's what she's saying. She also says it at the babysitters. So my friend Naomi watches them sometimes and she texts me, does she know your name? Because she just said Alyssa. Oh man, she's gonna be a wild one. Anyway, should we jump into these topics? I mean, if we covered all the hot topics from the last month,
Yeah, I
we'd be here
guess.
for like 12 hours. But we'll definitely talk
Yeah, true
about
enough.
the top few that have happened in the last few months. And of course, the number one topic would be Garrett Van Dorland's nomination in Oxford. So just to give a little bit of a rundown, Garrett Van Dorland is a political staffer. He worked on the Leslie Lewis leadership campaign, and he had been preparing and wanted to run in his home riding of Oxford, Ontario, for a while now. And so when Dave McKenzie, the MP, stepped down, there was a by-election that was called, which means there needed to be a nomination meeting. And he, of course, put his name forward along with a few others. And he was disqualified by the Conservative Party because what they allege, Sarah Fisher, who's the party spokesperson, made up this bullshit excuse that he failed to provide a list of all social media accounts and comments he made online or to the media. And when you talk to him or his campaign manager, they're like, we disclosed everything. There's nothing else. They haven't said anything like this up to us. So it's a completely made up excuse. They just didn't want Garrett to run because they did have a favored candidate. And that candidate ended up winning. His name is Arpan Khanna, and he was actually from Brampton. So they helicoptered him into the riding, and they just did everything in their power to make sure that their preferred candidate won. So then Garrett, after he was disqualified by the party, he used what resource he had left and he appealed the decision. So then it was voted on by National Council and he lost that vote. Now, both Arpan and another candidate, Rick Roth, had spoken out about the party's decision and urged them to let Garrett run, but they, of course, did not listen. And what's interesting, what happened after the nomination meeting, that both the president and the vice president of the Oxford EDA quit their positions. And they specifically highlighted the tensions between the party at the national level and the local organizers. And some of the most damning quotes from Catherine Agar, who was the former EDA president, said that that the nomination caused deep divisions in the Oxford membership, and it's her personal opinion that the Oxford nomination was hijacked by people from Ottawa and Brampton who crafted a win for Mr. Khanna and a small sample of the Oxford Conservative membership, because post leadership race, there were 6,000 members in the Oxford riding and only 2,700 voted. And I'm not sure how many candidates there were. Were there three, Scott?
3 in the end,
Three
yeah.
total? 3 in the end, yeah. So, I mean, 2,700 votes divided by 3 is not that many, considering the 6,000, the large number. So basically, this was a very aggravating, a very discouraging thing that happened in the Conservative Party, especially because Pierre Poilievre has said on numerous occasions and very recently before the nomination that they would have open nominations, that they would respect the democratic process. And then shortly after, he's got his lackeys going and disqualifying candidates that work for him. Like, he literally works for he's still to this day works for the Conservative Party of Canada. Like, it's absolutely mind-boggling, and it's very frustrating, to say the least.
Yeah, and one thing that we should note is Garrett and his team sold over 2,500 memberships, and that's without getting access to the membership list, because of course you have to be approved as a candidate by the party to get a hold of the list. So Arpan got 1,215 votes. So even if Garrett got, slightly over 50% of his vote out, like he would have won probably very close on the first ballot. He would have had to get most of his vote out to win on the first ballot, but he would have won that. And that's the whole reason why they did it. So it's very disingenuous. It's very hypocritical for someone like Pierre Poilievre to go around and saying like, oh, we're going to fight Justin Trudeau and get rid of the insiders and the gatekeepers. Like, well, you can't even get rid of the insiders and gatekeepers in your own party. Frankly, you put them there yourself. So why would we believe you that you would do the same if you ever became prime minister? So it was interesting because this all kind of came to a head and all became public. We knew that this was coming probably 2 or 3 weeks before it actually happened. We kind of always figured that it would. Because we knew that was the only way that Arpan could get the nomination, is if they disqualified Garrett, but they didn't have anything on Garrett. And so when this all came finally out in the public, I was out in BC doing our fundraising tour. And one of our longtime supporters, donors, right from the beginning, he was saying, I love your guys' podcast. I would listen to it religiously. But I think you guys are just a little too hard on Pierre. And I thought, fair enough, but just you wait, because now I think that we haven't been hard enough on Pierre. And that's not to say that, there's like a personal animosity or something like that. It all has to do with policy. And frankly, if you are listening to this and you are a Pierre supporter, but you disagree with him on abortion, you disagree with him on dealing with trans for kids issues and things of this nature, you should also be hard on him, because you would want him to succeed, but most importantly, to succeed in the right way. Because if we're just replacing liberals with liberals who balance books, then what good does that do us? So anyway,
and we should mention that, like, Pierre could have obviously stepped in at any point in time. Like,
he is a member of National Council. He's a voting member of National Council as leader.
But ultimately, this is Jenny Byrne, who worked under the worked for Harper, kind of was blamed for the Harper loss, went into the shadows, did some podcasting, whatever, came out, and now she's in OLO, which is the office of the leader of the opposition. She's a very important party figure, and not a SoCon, and is known for sort of like twisting the rules to her benefit. And as much as I, do want to stress that Pierre could have stepped in at any moment, this smells like her. It is her. We know that it's her. She was the first one to float this idea. This is what we're dealing with. Like, this is defying the grassroots. It's not listening to party members. It's being very sneaky and shady in the nomination process. When in public, you're saying, oh, we're going to have open nominations. We're going to get rid of the gatekeepers, fair and openness and freedom and all this bull crap. And it's not even happening in your own party, like you said. And it's frustrating for sure, especially when that's basically what liberals do, like you said. Like, this, if you hadn't told me this story, it would have sounded just like something Trudeau would have done. And I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. But shouldn't make sense when it's the Conservatives, and that's unfortunately what's happening right now.
Yeah, it's this. What happened in this nomination is worse than anything we dealt with when Aaron O'Toole was leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. By far, it's not even close. So it's interesting because speaking to a number of national councillors, and like you said, Alissa, those were the people who had the final say. That was the final level of appeal for Garrett to appeal his disqualification. They told me that they had way more emails. Some of them told me they had over 1,000 emails in something like 36 hours, 48 hours. They had way more emails from members of the party on this issue, the issue being Garrett being spiritually disqualified, compared to the next one, which would have been the non-carbon tax that Aaron O'Toole introduced in April of 2021. So, the carbon tax is an issue, I would say, that unites most conservatives. In the Conservative Party of Canada, most conservatives would be against the carbon tax. So if you have national councillors receiving hundreds of more emails in a much shorter amount of time about Garrett as opposed to the carbon tax, you know that you're on the wrong side. And I know that there was a number of caucus members, and that in the caucus meeting I heard from caucus members that it was quite a testy meeting, that a lot of them were screaming at Pierre because of the work of likely Jenny Byrne. Not just in the Oxford nomination, but there's also issues in the Calgary Heritage nomination as well. So they got to be careful. Like, quite frankly, like I don't know like what benefit she brings to Pierre to win the next election. I think that he could do just fine on his own, though. I think he also has his own issues that I think personally are going to pull him back to guarantee another.
Also, it's so weird. Like, Jenny Byrne and Pierre dated. Like, they dated for a while. There's like pictures of them kissing on the internet. Now he's kissing her ass, even though he's like a married man. Like, it's so bizarre to me. Like, get rid of Jenny Byrne. Just get rid of her. It's not a big deal. You'll still win.
Yeah, I think there'd be
hopefully you'll win even more.
Yeah, I think there'd be very few national councillors, very few members of caucus, very few party staff or OLO staff that would be opposed to that. So we'll see what happens. I mean, that's a very, like you said, it's a very close and intimate relationship. I'm not going to compare our friendship to that by any stretch of the means. But like, I can't imagine that, if you, let's say you were leader of the Conservative Party and you were getting rid of me, like that, and I were a problem, like a legitimate problem, I imagine that'd be a very difficult thing for you to do. And so even like 10 to 100 times more so for Pierre, I get it. But listen, that's the job. And she's like, she's going to be costing him seats if he's not careful.
And I just want to also speak on from an Albertan perspective. Like, Amber Reddy, I know voted the right way, but Steve Delansky, you are a coward, like the ultimate coward, because I know for a fact there were several hundred Albertans who are contacting him. I know that there were caucus members, Albertan caucus members, both provincially and federally, who called him. Very important people within the party who are contacting him regularly, before the vote for the past few days, and he still voted the wrong way, and he represents Alberta. He does not represent Alberta. He represents Jenny effing Byrne, and he deserves to be voted out at the next convention. He's an absolute coward, and I have zero respect for him.
Well, he terms out anyway, so he can't run again.
Well, good.
Yeah, so that's probably
good riddance.
That's probably why he just ignored the grassroots,
which is so stupid. Like, that's your frickin' job. Like, if you're terming out anyway, who cares if you piss off Jenny Byrne? Like, vote on behalf of Albertans the way you're supposed to. Like, what an absolute turd.
Well, I think what we see is that we see a lot of sycophants who are hoping that should Pierre win the next election, that they get some sort of appointment, or maybe they get to run as a candidate in a nice, easy riding.
I'd love that.
Because
come run as a candidate, Steve.
Because
I would love that.
Of course, they think they're going to be able to run as a candidate because they're just going to be parachuted into a riding, because that's the modus operandi apparently of Jenny Byrne and company. I think what they don't quite understand is that they still think that it's 2008 and that the party hasn't changed since then, since the heydays of the Harper years. But I'm sorry, like, there are a number of different groups that are active within the Conservative Party of Canada that are far more organized, have far more clout, have far more caucus members on board, especially including us pro-lifers. I mean, Alissa, you and I have been working on that for 6 or 7 years now. And I think that's going to come to a head. Like, I foresee a few different issues down the road that, regardless of what the polls say today, regardless of what the economic reality is out there, which is actually quite a bit improving here in Canada, though we may not feel it yet, the underlying numbers are suggesting that that's what is going to be happening before the end of the year. I see a few big social issues on the horizon that if
For
if
sure.
Pierre and company like aren't willing to grapple with that, it doesn't matter how far you are in the polls going into the election. During that 6-week election campaign, you're going to be destroyed because your silence is going to be deafening. And along the
It
way,
already is.
yeah, and along the way, when you're doing shit like this, like what you were doing in Oxford, like we're doing in Calgary Heritage, and who knows with other by-elections, because I don't see the general federal election happening for at least another 2 years. So there's a lot of time for a lot of by-elections and other stuff in between. You're going to lose a lot of people. One quick thing I'll say about that is, so like I said, I was in BC about a month ago and I was doing some fundraising presentations, and I was up in Vernon and I met with a lot of people who still to this day protest. Now they've been lifted since I left, but there were still COVID-19 restrictions in BC when it came to healthcare, and they were protesting every Saturday, those restrictions in Vernon. And I was told, and I believe it, that so many of those people, there's like 1,000 that come out, those were the people that filled the hotel room during the leadership race when Pierre went there a year ago. And so I asked him, like, okay, will you come to my presentation or whatever? Because a lot of them are pro-life anyway. And I was asking them where you and your friends are now on the Pierre issue. And they said, he's dead to us because of the whole Christine Anderson thing. So, like, it's deep paper cut after deep paper cut after deep paper cut. Is going to be difficult to win. And these are unforced errors, especially this nomination stuff. And so, yeah. And so, like, this is a deep paper cut. There's no way around it.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larossemedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
All right, well, we'll move on to our next topic, and that is a viral video that was circulating on Twitter, and it was Justin Trudeau at a rally at the University of Manitoba. I believe he was leaving the university, and he came face-to-face with a supposed PPC supporter who challenged him on abortion. So instead of me explaining the video, here it is. Just take a look.
I think mainly liberal abortion is against Christianity. I think.
But okay. Do you think that women should have the right to choose what happens to their own bodies?
Personally, no.
No. You think you should be able to choose what happens to a woman's body?
I think if they're sleeping around, they shouldn't be allowed to abort the baby. Personally, I'm pro-choice.
Wow. Oh wait, you just say you're pro-choice.
No.
You're pro-choice. No, you're not pro-choice.
No, I'm pro-life.
Okay, pro-life. Yeah. And you don't think women should be able to make choices what they do with their bodies?
With abortion, no.
Why not? Why not?
Because it was their choice to sleep around. They have to.
No. Whoa. That is. So a woman who is raped should be able to get an abortion?
I'd say that's where it gets complicated.
No, it doesn't get complicated.
But that's
it's either yes or no.
That's super specific example. So
No, but it's an all too common example.
Like
right? Women get raped all the time.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's something we have to take seriously.
But 95.
So let's talk about that specific example. Should a woman who was raped be able to get an abortion?
I'm split on it, 50-50. I think 95.
No. You are not in favor of saying yes. A woman who was raped should be able to choose to not bear that child.
I honestly don't know.
It sounds like you need to do a little more thinking and a little more praying on it.
All right, so there's a lot to be said for this video. Obviously, this kid is not a very strong pro-lifer. He even mistakenly calls himself pro-choice. And when he was challenged on like the specifics of his position, he, kind of said, I'm 50-50. And, maybe he is half pro-life or whatever. Maybe he isn't. What I found really interesting is Trudeau's style of answering, because he did very much the Socratic method.
Yeah, he did.
He was never put on the spot. He was always putting that guy on the spot, asking him questions. And so he did a good, like, if I was a complete idiot and didn't know anything about abortion and was just watching this video, I would be like, oh, this guy's a great politician who could defend his stances. But because I actually know about the issue, single thing that he said was completely ridiculous, you know, taking extreme examples and trying to justify his extremism because of those extreme examples. You know, he went right to the rape situation. He also talked about a woman's right to choose, which is so easy to combat. I mean, if it was solely about a woman's bodily autonomy, she'd be aborting herself. Like, there's a lot of one-liners that kid could have said if he, you know, was involved in the pro-life movement at all. But what I found sort of interesting is that there's another podcaster and conservative commentator named Viva Fry, and I was following some of his tweets recently because he was like, you know, it's really difficult to get close to Trudeau, let alone this guy, you know, was challenging him and there was just so happened to be someone filming from behind. Like, how is this guy in the right place at the right time? And the guy who was actually filming was a guy named Kevin Schroff, and he is a Democrat from the US. He calls himself a Democratic commentator and political organizer, and he currently serves as senior advisor to the Institute of Education based in Washington, D.C. So he's basically this Democrat political strategist / operative who just so happened to be at this University of Manitoba event catching this owning of this PPC supporter by Trudeau. So it seems strange to me, especially because this kid clearly didn't know anything about the pro-life position, and maybe he is legit, maybe he actually wasn't ready to debate that topic, but it just seemed very staged, and we all know how Trudeau likes his staging. So just aside from the actual facts of the video,
that's interesting because I completely disagree with that. And I did see Viva Fry's tweets about it, and it's actually, I think, way easier, especially on campuses, for a regular person to get access to Justin Trudeau than it would be to get access to Pierre Poilievre. You want to talk about stage events?
Yeah.
Pierre Poilievre is extraordinarily staged, just like Harper.
Yeah.
He doesn't take questions.
Well, he doesn't. Yeah.
He doesn't take questions. He doesn't engage in the crowd. You have to line up to go and see him. Now, of course, you can, you know, have your 30 seconds and you can take your phone or whatever, and he'll ask your question in there if you're willing to stand in line for like 2 hours, although I don't think those lines are as long as they were a year ago. But with the Prime Minister Trudeau, what I'll say about him is that he gets right in there with crowds. So there was a video just before Christmas. I think it was just before the by-election in December of 2022 in Mississauga Lakeshore, and the Prime Minister was in Ottawa in the Byward Market, I believe, and he was just doing a walkabout, whatever. What do they call it? They call it Main Streeting. So just kind of going up and down the street or whatever. And there was a gentleman that came up to him, and they had like a 3 or 4 minute exchange. I will say that the Prime Minister was very patient, even though he had a complete disagreement with this gentleman. This gentleman was someone who was very pro-convoy, anti-vax mandate, all that type of stuff. And I will say that the Prime Minister, even though everything he said I disagreed with, just like in this video, everything he said I disagreed with, he was calm, he was in control, he was listening, he was responding and answering questions. Although in this video, like you said, he's using the Socratic method, so he's answering questions by asking them, which is fair enough. But what struck me was interesting is I could see that PPC guy being pro-life because I think he's probably kind of like more from like that kind of red pill kind of part of young men's society, more so than from the pro-life part. Like, had he just gone to his college campus group, his college pro-life campus group, like you said, like all that stuff is easy to refute. Like, okay, rape, fine. Let's not talk about that 2% of abortions. Let's talk about the other 98%. You know, it's,
or turn the questioning back to him. Are you in favor of abortion up to 9 months?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you in favor of sex selective abortion?
Yeah, like, so you're,
you know,
when you're saying,
are you aborting your own body? Or are you aborting a baby's body? Whose body is it?
It's not like women have 20 fingers and 20 toes for, you know, the most part. So like it's very easy to do. It's very simple. So like until there's further proof, like I don't think it's illegitimate. Like, of course, that Democrat guy could have been there. Like, it's the right place, right time.
I just find that very odd.
I don't because there are lots of videos out there of Trudeau in the past doing it. Like, we haven't really seen them since before the COVID restrictions came into place, but since then he's been out and about. And the other thing I'll say is that he's looking good. He's looking sharp. Like he's looking like he wants to fight the next election. And it's interesting to me because I'm trying to be very, very objective about this. Like, as time goes on and we're getting closer and closer to the next election, frankly, I think Trudeau is sounding and getting better, even though everything he's saying, I disagree with. But the way that he is politicking, like he is getting himself off the mat, like he is looking more and more like 2015 Justin Trudeau in fighting for him. And I would say a lot of the other leaders, most especially Pierre Poilievre, like compared to last year, is looking worse and worse as time goes on. So this is very interesting. Like I thought that this video, even though again everything that Trudeau said in it I completely disagreed with, I thought this video was prime example that the Prime Minister is getting better and better into fighting for him. That doesn't mean that you can't debate him. That doesn't mean that he can't be beaten. But it should be a wake-up call to Sarah Fisher, who's Director of Communications for the Conservative Party of Canada, and Pierre Poilievre and Jenny Byrne. Like, get your shit together. Because whatever the polls are, there's one thing I've learned about being in politics full time for the past 7 years is that polls go up, they go down, they show a trend. The trend is real, the trend isn't fake. But that 6-week election campaign, when it begins, it's like the playoffs, right? Everything changes. We were just talking about at the beginning of the show, like, Winnipeg is supposed to get destroyed. Florida is supposed to get destroyed. Now Florida is tied with Boston as we speak. Winnipeg is up a game on Vegas. Everything changes in the playoffs. Everything changes in an election campaign, in a 6-week election campaign. And as terrible as a governor, like as terrible as running a government that Justin Trudeau is, he's a phenomenal campaigner. So they better bring their A game, because right now I think their A game's turning into a B game.
And you know what? On that note, it was very frustrating to see complete losers like Ryan Williams, who's a Conservative MP in the Bay of Quinte, just commenting on that, like, I'm pro-choice. Like, there's no, turning the tables. There's no going on the, offensive. It's
there's
completely
no fight.
Defensive. There's no fight whatsoever. And then some of the Conservatives saying, only the Liberals are bringing this issue up, and this is not a winnable electoral issue. And it's like, what other issue the Conservatives are running on that has the majority of Canadians who want restrictions on abortion in every province? Who, what other issue says that 61% of Bloc Québécois voters and 51% of Liberal voters said in a one persuasion poll that they are more likely to vote for a political party that promised to legally restrict sex-selective abortion. Where are those numbers on any other issue that the Conservatives are running on?
Not guns, not inflation, not CBC, none of that.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's a super majority. Like, why is this not a winnable electoral issue? It absolutely is. The numbers can show it over and over and over and over and over again. But if you're going to let Trudeau walk all over you with talking points from the 1960s, yeah, you're going to lose it. But if you actually upgrade and get some good talking points, some easy talking points, some talking points that speak to the majority of Canadians who don't think that Canada should be one of the only countries in the entire world with no law on abortion, you can actually win this battle. And all the while saving lives. Like, what issue gives you both of those things? I'll never understand.
This is why they're going to lose, Alissa. They're going to lose the next election because they're not going to be willing to talk about stuff like this. It's okay. I gotta delve into this because we haven't talked for a while, and everyone's just gonna have to deal with it. So just everyone strap in. Go crack a beer or something. I gotta
blanket on.
Yeah, exactly. Like, snuggle in, here we go. So I was in Ottawa the day that the budget was dropped, right? Mm-hmm. Hours before the budget was, because the Minister of Finance always waits for the markets to close because you don't want to influence the markets with the budget, right? So budget speeches are usually given, a little bit after 4 p.m. Eastern. So there I was in Ottawa. Now I wasn't on Parliament Hill, but my phone's exploding because a couple hours before the budget was dropped, early in the afternoon, there was a debate. I forget about what bill in the House of Commons, and some dolt of a member of Parliament from the Liberal caucus, Jennifer O'Connell, gets up, and I think she's Pickering Uxbridge, and attacks Leslie Lewis for being a Nazi. Yeah, the black lady is a racist. Great line of attack. And Leslie gets up, and in less than 2 minutes, defends herself clearly, articulately, with passion, no talking points. And that is what conservative right-wing media was talking about that day. This is budget day. This is Pierre's big day. this is a whole reason why he exists and why he is the leader of the opposition. This is the reason, frankly, that he was hired to be leader of the Conservative Party of Canada.
Yeah.
And the whole day was derailed, so to speak, because Leslyn was actually willing to stand up for herself and for others on a non-economic issue. And I was thinking, like, they don't get it. They don't freaking get it. And the OLO and Sarah Fisher and the the full-time staff in the Conservative Party of Canada, that for many people who are watching this, your donations are paying for if you donate to the Conservative Party of Canada, which if you do should stop. You should donate to organizations like us so that we make sure that we get actual good candidates in and not dolts that aren't going to respond to stuff like this, good candidates like Leslyn. They don't get it that whenever you stand up to the Liberals on some sort of non-economic social issue, you will always get a stronger, more vociferous, more passionate response from the base and from beyond the Conservative base than you ever will talking about any economic issue every single day of the week, no matter what. And I still don't think that lesson was learned. So then the next day, after the budget was issued, I was meeting with a couple of staffers on the Hill, and they were like, it was like 10 in the morning or whatever, like, Scott, you got to come over here, look at this email we got from the OLO, that's the Office of Leader of the Opposition, on what we should provide our bosses, who are the members of parliament that they work for, on talking points in response to the budget. And it was just crap, Alissa. It was utter bullshit. Because they were like, shared these graphics. And it was like, these graphics are dated. They look like they came from 2008, which makes total sense, because if Jenny Byrne is actually working in OLO as a volunteer, then of course she's using the same people she used like 10 plus years ago, 15 years ago. That's why they look so dated. They had numbers like, the deficit is $40.3 billion this year. Now the national debt's 1.1 trillion, which, like, those aren't good things, but most Canadians are gonna be like, I don't know, is that good? Is that bad? Like, the deficit 2 years ago was 300 billion. Now it's 40 billion. So isn't that good? Like, but there was nothing like, like your share of the national debt has increased by $1,200 this year because of Justin Trudeau. Like, that hits people way more. My whole point is that even on, like, the number one issue that's near and dear to the leader's heart, they completely failed. And so if you're not going to grab that issue by the horns, and by the way, inflation is coming down. Like, I've noticed it personally at the grocery. Like at the groceries, like at the supermarket. People I've talked to have noticed about it, it as well. It's now coming out in the numbers that inflation, prices are still going up, but they're going up at a much slower rate. So now they're increasing this past month in March by 4.3%, whereas the month before it was like 10%. Like, that's a pretty big decrease. So your whole thing about fighting Justin Trudeau was on inflation, and now that's gone. We're going to talk about
COVID restrictions and inflation, and both of those things are.
And you know what the Liberals are going to bring, Alissa? They're going to bring the Trans for Kids issue, because what we saw at the provincial level with the NDP MPP bringing up that private members bill on basically bubble zones around drag queen storytime hour, that's going to come. Federally, and if you're not going to have a response to it because it looks like Pierre and crew are just super, super scared to talk about it, that's not going to go unnoticed by a lot of the base.
Yeah.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Not just like at the federal level either, Alissa. Like, this is also happening, like I said, the provincial level. There's that private members bill in Ontario. And then you look in Alberta, right? You look at what's happening with the UCP. So there was this candidate by the name of Tory Tanner. Wonderful woman down from Lethbridge. She won the nomination for Lethbridge West, which frankly is one of the only ridings outside of both Edmonton and Calgary that the NDP have.
Yeah.
So she did a video for her nomination where she talks about instances in public education, so in elementary schools, of elementary students being exposed to pornographic materials and teachers helping students transition without the notification of parents, which is absolutely happening not just in Alberta. And
Absolutely.
and the NDP are like losing their minds about this and everything like that. And what does Danielle Smith do? She cuts her loose. She said, like, you're no longer a candidate. There's immediate pressure on her to resign, and she resigned as a candidate. What was interesting is that a few weeks before that, at the Manning Center Conference, or Canada Strong and Free, whatever it's called now, Danielle Smith was there, and she did a sit-down interview with our good friend Andrew Lawton from True North Center. And it was like a 10-minute interview, and if you guys don't follow True North Center, like, I think that's probably well, if not definitely one of the premier news sources here in Canada. I love what they do. I think they're very balanced. I think they're very professional. It kind of sucks if Anthony Furey does win and becomes the mayor of Toronto.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, of course,
it wouldn't.
Yeah, I know, and I know. You both want it and you don't want it, but anyway.
Yeah.
So Andrew is like probably like one of my favorite journalists out there. So there he is interviewing Danielle Smith, and one of the questions he had was like, okay, so in the city of Calgary, they passed a bylaw recently where you cannot protest outside of drag queen storytime hour. And, don't you think that this goes against freedom? Don't you think this goes against, chartered rights and everything like this? Things that Danielle Smith like really, really campaigned on for the leadership for the UCP back in the autumn of 2022. And she said to him, her answer to Andrew was, well, we have laws in the criminal code where you can't disrupt a religious service, so I don't see how that's any different. So she's comparing Drag Queen Storytime Hour to a religious service. So that should tell you enough in and of itself. And then secondly, they're not protesting inside the library. They're protesting outside on the street, on the sidewalk, where peacefully, mind you, where people should be allowed to protest. And so Andrew brought that up as a second question. Like, I think he was kind of shocked. Like, are you sure? And she's like, oh yeah, no, this is totally fine by me. Like, it's being challenged by the Canada Constitutional Foundation, so we'll see what the courts do. What the courts do, the courts have had Liberals being appointed to it for 10 years, even when Harper was Prime Minister. What the hell do you think the courts are going to do? You're going to be like, absolutely, like, we should extend the bubble zone from 150 meters to 1,500 meters. Like,
I don't know if it was in that interview or a different one, but she actually defends the Drag Queen Story Hour by saying that she is so in favor of parental rights that parental choice, that these parents are choosing to bring their kids there, and so we should respect that. Like, it is such a dysfunction of that talking point and a dysfunction of parental rights. Like, where do you draw the line with parental rights then, Danielle Smith? Like, if a parent was giving your kid alcohol or drugs or something like that, is it parental rights? Like, there's got to be a line there. You're not just like, no matter what, all for in favor of parental rights, and it's a insult to those who fight for parental rights and true parental choice to say that this should be defended because of that reasoning. It's just she's got everything backwards right now, and that's why the election is going to be close. I didn't think it was going to be close, and I thought there was no way in hell that could happen here, but it just seems each poll, when the numbers come out, like each time, it's scary. Like, we cannot possibly go back to an NDP government, and it would be her fault both times it would be much of her fault, if we did.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I thought that they had turned things around in the city of Calgary earlier this spring, right? I thought kind of February, March, I was like, okay, like they're doing a good job, mostly because she had shut up and wasn't saying anything dumb, and then she basically did the same thing. Not quite, but she more or less did the same thing when it comes to prosecutions with Artur Pawlowski. And like, I don't think that Pastor Pawlowski should have faced all that, right? First and foremost. But what she was doing and having those conversations is very similar to what Justin Trudeau was doing with the director, or what he wanted Jody Wilson-Raybould to do for the director of prosecutions for SNC Lavalin a few years ago. That's why we have certain laws in place, so you don't politicize the prosecution service. And then, she's, DQing candidates who actually want to stand up for conservative things. Like, let's be honest and let's call a spade a spade. People like Danielle Smith and people like Pierre Poilievre are not conservative. They're libertarian, and they just happen to be within our conservative party. So anyone who is pro-life, anyone who does not want the trans agenda being stuffed down, the gender ideology agenda being stuffed down your kids' throats in public schools, or other kids' throats in public schools, if you're smart enough not to have your kids in public schools. But you voted for Danielle Smith over Taves, or you voted Pierre Poilievre over Leslyn Lewis. Like, this is a wake-up call to you. Wake up, get your head out of your ass, and start paying attention, because these things have consequences. Because now you're going to have what should be a changed election federally, probably not change over the trans issue. That's what my prediction is. I know we're 2 years out from that, and I could be wrong, but check the receipts 2 years from now. And I think, like you said, Alissa, the UCP is really in trouble of losing Calgary. Now, I'm not saying don't vote UCP, period. I'm not saying don't vote for the Conservative Party of Canada, period. Unless you live in, Brooks, Medicine Hat, or unless you live in Carleton, you can't vote for or against Danielle Smith or Pierre Poilievre, respectively. So if your local UCP candidate is pro-life, if your local Conservative candidate is pro-life, obviously vote for that candidate and help them out if the numbers are tight and they need help. But if do not vote for your pro-abortion UCP or pro-abortion Conservative candidate if you have another candidate who's pro-life, even if they're only polling at 2%. And this should be a lesson to Danielle Smith. It should be a lesson to Pierre Poilievre. Like, I'm sorry, but if you're not actually want to stand up for conservative values, don't expect conservatives to vote for your non-conservative candidates.
And both Danielle Smith and Pierre are lifers. They're career politicians. They've been in for decades, and they've been waiting for this. Like, they just want power at this point.
For what?
Like, it's been
to do
exactly
what? Like
they just want to be premier. They want to be prime minister. That's their. I have been on the prize for this long, and they're they don't have the drive for the real issues. They just that's all they want is to be in power. That's all I get anyway at this point, and it's. And because they don't have the drive for the real issues, I wonder if that's even going to happen. We'll see, I guess.
Well, okay, so real quick, I mean, we can talk about this later because we're going to have, obviously, time coming forward. We're getting closer and closer to the provincial election, which has to happen by May 29th. And as of recording, is April 19th. So I don't see why it would be any earlier than May 29th. But you're in the city of Calgary, right? What's the sense that you're getting in Calgary? Like, is it super tight? Can it go either way? Is it leaning one way or the other? What are you kind of picking up on the ground? I know you're only going to the hospital and to church.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to preface this by saying I've been on maternity leave. Like, last provincial election, I was out there all day, every day. Now that hasn't been the case. But I will say, like, the general feeling that I had was that there was no way, even if a dog was the leader of the UCP, like a literal animal, that we would still win. And now it's getting more and more uncomfortable for me, because as much as I hate Danielle Smith and I don't like, some of my the candidates, having Rachel Notley is like 1,000 times worse. And I hate that being a driving force behind, why I want her to win. Like, oh, well, this person, I hate that kind of, the lesser of two evils. I hate being put in that position. But Rachel Notley and her caucus is truly scary.
Yeah.
When it comes to parental rights, when it comes to like basically everything that I stand for. So, I do feel like there's a way stronger difference provincially here between the NDP and the UCP than there is between the federal Conservatives and the federal Liberals, because if you're not going to do anything about these issues, there's no difference. But here there is a major difference. Like, when the NDP were in power, the attack on education was insane. With Jason Kenney, he was able to get that back, refund a lot of or reaccredit a lot of independent schools, charter schools, homeschooling. Like, it was just absolutely
But do you think
wild.
that Danielle Smith would do that?
I think that she would keep it status quo, which is good because Kenny set that stage for her. I don't think she would go out on a limb like Kenny did, but even that is better than like just the vicious attacks constantly. I mean, it's wild that every single time I go to any event or speak at any event, I always see an NDP MLA, Janice Irwin there, and she's always by herself. She's like the most pro-trans, pro-abortion person like in the country. She's absolutely wild. So she's just so radical. It's just, I think in more conservative provinces and even in more conservative like cities and stuff, I think this is why we have such a radical left mayor in Calgary, that the more conservative people are, the more radical you get on the other side. And if you do have that vote splitting, then that's the person who ends up winning. And it's truly terrifying, honestly. That's definitely a con of living in a pretty conservative province.
Yeah, I mean, like, to be fair, Alberta, I would say, is not nearly as conservative as, like, Saskatchewan, for example. Like, Saskatchewan's, like, legitimately conservative. Alberta, for the most part, is, like, a mix of libertarian and conservatives. And that's where, like, in Daniel Smith, you have that struggle, right, within the party. And, you know, when you don't stand up for conservative values when things get tough, you're going to start losing elections. I mean, that's the tale as old as time here in Canada. So, speaking about trans issues and standing up against trans for kids, Canadian Chris Elston, right? That's his name.
Yeah.
Billboard Chris.
Yeah. Yeah, this will be our final topic, and we'll just talk about it real quick because it is a Canadian thing, and it's just nuts what happened. Basically, there's like Scott said, there's a Canadian man named Chris Elston. He's known as Billboard Chris online, and he basically goes around different cities and towns and rallies and that kind of thing with a billboard around his neck that says children cannot consent to puberty blockers, and he has conversations with the public about this specific issue. Very passionate guy, as he should be, just can't sit by and do nothing. Well, you know, children are being put on puberty blockers, are being, having these irreversible surgeries. And so he recently showed up at Grandview Park in Vancouver, where they were hosting a Trans Day of Visibility rally. And the minute he got there, he was being completely harassed by all the participants, all the activists. And so he was filming. He always films, and some people that were with him were filming. And this one particular man who was dressed as a woman got right up in his face and started screaming "F you, F you, F you" at him. And Chris sort of like put up his hand a little bit to create some distance. And that guy started punching him in the face and pushing him, and it just physically assaulting him in various ways, and which ended up Chris had a bloodied nose and cuts on his face. And so the 911 was called. So like that's one element of this story, which I mean, it's not that surprising as someone who's, you know, been attacked and stuff like that and has seen it from the pro-life side. This isn't that surprising. But what happened was they called 911, and the investigating officer said that Chris instigated the fight, and she was actually laughing at him when he got attacked and when he was speaking to her, because again, it's all filmed, so you can watch how she reacted. She refused to give him her name, but on her uniform it said badge 3081. And it was later found out that this police officers went so far. And Chris actually said later on that she was liking tweets on Twitter of his attack. Like no remorse, no regret, no ramifications, but people went wild once they saw this video.
No objectivity.
No, zero objective. Like it was absolutely crazy. They didn't step in at all. And so then so many people, including myself, were emailing, messaging, contacting the Vancouver police. So then they were forced to make a remark and say that it was under investigation. And they were actually saying that, you know, they were playing the victim card, that they can't believe the animosity towards the Vancouver police. Well, maybe if you actually did your job, there would be no animosity. And if you actually research this woman, in 2021, she was actually found guilty of engaging in police misconduct with a separate issue. Basically, this Indigenous woman, her son was missing, and he ended up dying of an overdose. And so when this Frederique woman went to go give the news to this mother, she walked into the door, and the very first thing she said was, "First of all, Glenn is dead," like her son. That's how she said the news, which caused the mother to collapse. people around her were comforting her. And this is why the investigation is such a farce. And I've had this happen to me where it was investigated, but there was an internal investigation that happened and they found her not guilty of anything. And then there was another investigation, and outside a retired judge who then investigated and found that she was guilty of, she committed discreditable conduct, neglect of duty, discourtesy, and abuse of authority. So that was his findings outside of the police investigation. So this woman is completely unfit to be a police officer. She's completely not objective when it comes to the issues. Like, she will literally stand by and watch people get assaulted if it's because they're assaulting somebody on the grounds of an issue that she doesn't agree with. And it just goes to show you, how this issue is escalating so intensely in Canada. And just as a final note, I also think that the trans movement should rename their day, because like the Trans Day of Visibility is really funny to me when you have like 6 foot, 7 foot, like we can see you. We can very much see you. You are very obvious in a crowd. There's no need to like be any more visible. We know you're there.
Yeah, it's interesting because we see an increase in violence around this, like right around the world. Like the Riley Gaines situation at the university in San Francisco, basically a mob surrounding her because she's like, well, I'm a woman and I believe only women should compete in women's categories in sports and not biological men. And they basically now want to like more or less murder her, rip her limb to limb. And she's like now a Nazi or whatever, according to the radical left. You see things like this and you see what's happening to Chris. I mean, Chris has been through a lot already. Like he has had like a broken arm or something like that from just standing there in downtown Montreal back in March of 2021. So I am waiting to see finally a federal or provincial politician, I don't care from what political party, stand up for people like Chris and stand up for this issue, because I think it's a winning issue.
They'll stand up for women.
Yeah.
Like, we're the ones who are it's terrifying, because I know this happened in Calgary. I just got back from swimming lessons with my 2.5-year-old. Like, it is absolutely terrifying to me, and I dare anyone to come, a full grown man with an erect penis, to come into a change room when my daughter is there. Like, that is just absolutely insane to me that could happen. And I know that it's happened in another pool in Calgary, and it's just insane to me. It's such an easy issue. It's such a freaking easy issue to speak out on. And so these politicians better get their ass in gear, because this is harming women and it's harming children.
Cowards,
yeah.
All cowards. Yep. It is what it is. Like, let's not dance around it.
It's nuts, but
yeah.
But good for Chris. I mean, I haven't always agreed with him. He attacked Leslie Lewis during her one of her leadership campaigns. But I think it's good that he feels strongly, and I think he's good. Yeah. It's good that he's pressuring politicians to speak out more bluntly about it, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing when you're attacking politicians who are on your side. But still, I understand the passion, and I completely support him, even though I might not agree with his style sometimes. But on that note, we'll end this podcast maybe real quickly. I don't know if you want to go series by series.
I absolutely want to go series by series. Okay. Yes. We'll do it quick.
Okay, I haven't thought about it I haven't thought series by series, but I will give a prediction nonetheless.
Okay.
Too intensely, yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's start with the West, because the West is the best. Except not actually when it comes to NHL. No. Okay, so let's start with 1 versus 8, which is Vegas versus Jets. What do you got?
I will go with Jets for you. And I actually do think that I think that they will win that. I think they're underrated, and I think that underdog status will give them a little bit more of a nudge that they need. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm gonna say Winnipeg. I mean, I'm sure you're gonna say that too.
Yeah, I had Jets in 6, and the reason for this. Sorry, this is supposed to be quick, but the reason I'm saying this is because when you look at the underlying statistics, like I do. When it comes to hockey, I kind of like to mix everything up, like the actual statistics, like how many goals for, goals against, the underlying analytics, so like expected goals for, expected goals against, as well as like what's the eye test, like what does the flow of the game look like and everything like that. And if you look at those underlying statistics in the last 3 weeks of the regular season, the Jets were basically number one in every category. Now, they weren't playing necessarily the best of teams per se, and some teams that they were playing like already, like they already knew they were out, or they already knew where they were going to be seeded for the playoffs. But still, like they were coming in hot. And the playoffs, regardless of which sport, it's all about kind of where you are at in your season. So I originally had Jets in 6, but if they win the game tomorrow in Vegas and they win both those games in Vegas, I think it could be Jets in 5. Colorado and Seattle. That's the next one. That's wild card 2 and number 2 in the West.
I'm gonna say Seattle.
Really?
Yeah.
See,
I think that
I totally forgot that Grubauer did play for the Avs. So he's going to have a chip on his shoulder for sure.
Yeah. And I think there's something about new teams, like we saw it with Vegas, and I think we'll see it with Seattle. Like they push through and they really have something to prove. And I'll go with the underdog. I like the underdog story, so I'll go with the underdog there.
Before last night, I said Colorado in 6. Now it maybe change out to Colorado in 7, or maybe even Seattle 6 or 7. After watching the bit of the end of the game last night, because I was like, Colorado just like does not look like a defending Stanley Cup champions. Tampa Bay does, and we'll get to that. But
well,
yeah.
You can't base it on that game.
No.
That game was crazy.
No, but like
the calls, the penalties, the everything, the challenges, the bizarre goal, like it was derailed.
Sure,
like,
but at least Tampa was trying, and they took advantage of the opportunities given to them.
It was only because that game was only, and this always happens, but the Leafs started off so bad.
Yeah, they did.
But once they got their momentum, holy hell, I've never seen them play so well. Like they were just on fire. They did have a lot of giveaways. But I mean, in that second period, it was so good. Like it was, especially with power plays, just block after block after block, steal after steal. Like it was nuts. But then the whole like, wasn't a goal, derailed everything. Then it was at one point like a 5-on-3. Like it was just, it got crazy.
What did you think about the Michael Bunting situation?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think it was that. I mean, I'm not. 3 games seems excessive.
I agree. I agree that 3 seems excessive. I thought 2. Yeah. I thought 2 would be more reasonable, but like 3 could be like the rest of the season.
And the thing about him is that he drew a penalty earlier, and they were close at that point. So like there was no need really. Yeah. Like I don't know what he was doing. He is a physical player, but yeah, it sucks now because of that. It reminds me, I'm having like flashbacks to Kadri when every playoffs he'd be like
2 in a row, and then
it was so annoying.
And then Clifford as well. Okay, Dallas, Minnesota. What do you have for them?
Yeah, I have no idea. Dallas, Minnesota. I have no idea. Who's the underdog in that one? I'm not even sure.
Not really either.
But like who had more points?
Dallas did. Dallas is, yeah. They have home ice advantage, but barely. Like we're talking like I think they were within 2 or 3 points of each other.
I will say Dallas in that one, just from what I've seen. I would say Dallas. I'm not gonna give predictions. Like I have no idea. Honestly, but I'm just gonna go overall.
That one to me is like the true coin flip. I'm gonna say Minnesota in 7, but like I said at the beginning, that game I watched the other night was a slugfest. It was dirty hockey, which I'm there for. And whoever comes out of it, I think is going to be beaten up. It's going to be tough second round. This one I'm excited to watch in a little bit. I think the puck drops in a few minutes. Edmonton and LA.
Oh, I'm all for Edmonton. I'm like so rooting for Edmonton. Aaron's going to divorce me, but I actually, my prediction is Edmonton is in the Stanley Cup Finals.
You think Edmonton comes out of the West? Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Yeah, I have Edmonton in 6. Like they were in control for a lot of that game, and then just the third period, it's a 7-game series. Whereas like with Winnipeg and Vegas and like some of the other with Winnipeg and Vegas and with Colorado and Seattle, it was like the whole game was like Winnipeg was dictating. The whole game like Seattle was dictating. Like that's if I were a Colorado fan or a Vegas fan, I'd be more concerned. Whereas with like Edmonton, I don't think I'd be as concerned. Although the fans were super pissed off that they dropped that lead and they were throwing shit on the ice twice.
Yeah. I know.
Okay, Boston, Florida.
Oh, Boston. As much as I would love to see my like if I was if I was living in a perfect world, what would happen is Boston would beat the Panthers, the Leafs would beat Tampa Bay, and then they would go head to head. And then we would beat Boston, and that would just make up for all the years of chaos. I know that's not going to happen, but it would just be an absolute, like, you would never see me again because I would just go off happy, floating around in the sky aimlessly as the happiest woman alive.
A chariot would come down for you, take you, just swoop you up to heaven. I have Boston in 5, but I will say right now, with 3 minutes left in the third, as we're filming this,
score?
5-2 for Florida.
Oh wow!
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be a sweep, but that's good.
And they're playing in Boston.
Oh wow, great!
Yeah,
I love it. I love to hear it.
Carolina, New York, the Islanders.
Carolina.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had Carolina in 5, and what is the score? Carolina won that in overtime in Carolina, so now they're up to 2-rip.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Carolina was up 2-0. Like, I know they're up 2-0 in the series. They were up 2-0 earlier in the game, I think going into halfway through the second or the third, and then the Islanders were able to tie it up. So that's interesting. But yeah, I think Carolina gets that one. Okay, Toronto and Tampa.
I mean, Toronto. Obviously. I could never say Tampa, but it'll be a close.
I would like to see, like, I was having our friend Josh, I was having a conversation with him earlier today. He's a big Canucks fan because he's born and raised in Vancouver, so I think he's legally obliged. I think that's the only reason why he is a Canucks fan. But we were both talking, like, yeah, we actually like Toronto as a team. Like, I like those players. I like the coach. I like the organization.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Toronto fans that I don't like. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the Toronto fandom. I would love for them to see them come out finally from, especially like what Kyle Dubas has been able to do, and to a lesser extent Sheldon Keefe. But I think Tampa in 6, especially now that they have the home ice advantage. We'll see tomorrow night.
Yeah, I don't think that I honestly don't think that matters, but we'll see. Yeah, I mean, when
I guess with home ice advantage, I don't think fans. For me, I don't think fans play as big of a role in it. Not that they don't play a role, but I think the last change, I think that plays a really big role, especially like when it's like overtime and it's a face-off in like your defensive zone or the offensive zone, and you have last change. I think that's a huge advantage.
I kind of like that they lost the first game because I feel like we always win the first game and we're all like high and mighty, and then it always comes crashing down. Whereas if we're in a catch up situation, it might work better for us. But when the Leafs were on, even in that game, they were far better than Tampa. Like, it was not even close. But yeah, I think they're just so inside. Like, you know, Mitch Marner, in the first period, he didn't like barely touch the puck. Like, it was nuts. So some of these guys really need to get outside of their head. You can tell that they're really, I mean, I'm sure it must be probably the worst franchise to play in,
the pressure,
to a certain extent.
The pressure in that market would be insane.
And the playoffs, especially.
Yeah, exactly.
Like and I listen to the radio even here in Calgary, and that's all they talk about. Like, they just hammer them. So I can.
Well, the radio in Calgary doesn't have much to talk about these days. So
at least talk about Edmonton. But yeah. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, I'm ready to get hurt again, but I do think, and like the points, you know, the stats say that they are a better team, but again, it's just that it's a whole curse, like mentality, everything, right, that they have to overcome. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, players are just so different. Rangers and Devils.
Yeah, I have no idea. I know that Aaron really likes the Rangers, so I'm gonna say the Rangers.
Yeah, I'm saying New York in 5. I love what the Devils did this year. They had that 13-game streak at the beginning of the season. You know, they weren't even in the playoffs last year. Now they're toward the top of the seeds in their division. I think they were battling with Carolina to be top in that division. But New York's got such a cool team. They got some really great players. They got Shesterkin back there. So yeah, I would love, like, there's a few teams that I'm really excited for going forward. Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, and I would put Jersey in there as well. And I think those 4 teams in the next 5 years are going to be future powerhouses. So this is
and then the Stanley Cup final. Who do you think?
I mean, I guess like from the West, I would say either Edmonton or Winnipeg, just I mean, it's such a small sample size right now, right? But I can see Edmonton overcoming LA. Winnipeg, like if they look like that all the way through, like they're going to be a tough out for everyone, including if they see Boston in the finals. Colorado, they just seemed like gassed out. Like they had to run hard.
Oh, yeah.
They had to run hard to get into the playoffs. Like before, because I think they were out of the playoffs at the not at the trade deadline. At the All-Star break. At the All-Star break.
Yeah.
So they had to get in the playoffs, and then they battled their way to first in the division. And I think that's been a really long run. Landeskog is not going to be in the playoffs whatsoever for them. And then for Minnesota and Dallas, I think they're just going to beat each other up so badly that it doesn't, like, you have some momentum that comes out of that for sure. But I think they're going to be so gassed. So that's why I'm kind of saying Edmonton or Winnipeg coming out from what we've seen so far. I mean, Vegas can come back and win it 4-1.
And do you think anyone can beat Boston?
Yeah. I mean, it's happening tonight, right? I think when I think of Boston, I think of another Boston team being the Patriots. And I can't remember if it was like 2008 or something like that, where they had their undefeated season. They're obviously undefeated in the playoffs. And then they lost to Eli Manning and the New York Giants in the Super Bowl. And I mean, that happens. That's sports, right? Like the playoffs is, and you just get in a different mentality. Yeah, I could see Boston in the final. I don't think it's going to be Boston. Like, I think it's going to be either New York or Tampa in the Stanley Cup final. So those would be like the four I would think they're going to go into the final. But who knows? Can you imagine how accurate either you or I... Well, And like we should just do that and make money. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We should be sponsored by like everyone else. Every other podcast is sponsored by like sports betting websites. Why aren't we?
Yeah, got Dan O'Toole on here. Aaron and I were in a hockey pool and we got third place. So next year.
So who do you think is going to be in the final? You think Edmonton from the West?
I think Boston and Edmonton.
I think Boston and Edmonton. That'd be fun. It'd be like new versus old, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah. Okay.
So on that note, we will end this podcast. We will see you in a couple of weeks. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss when we have new podcast episodes. You can catch us at thestinkingalbatross.ca. Make sure that you comment, you like, you subscribe, all that fun stuff. It was great hanging out with you, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining us.
Bye for now.